As a neutral power in World War I, the Netherlands was not a quick appreciator of the need for establishing a large air force. Created in 1913, the Dutch Army Aviation Group tottered along as a comparatively minor service. So it is a little surprising that the Netherlands was actually a top-rank nation in the design and production of aircraft throughout the interwar years. This was due to two primary reasons. First, the Dutch had a highly active designer and builder of aircraft on hand in the shape of Anthony Fokker, the same guy who designed and built the most famous German fighters of the First World War. With the defeat of the Central Powers in 1918, Fokker had returned home to the Netherlands, where he had set up a new factory and continued building aircraft. Although the most successful of these were Fokker's civilian models, they continued to produce military aircraft which would enjoy a reasonable level of export success throughout the 1920s and 30s. The second factor was that though the Netherlands itself was not really interested in having a modern air force, in fact they nearly dissolved the small air corps they did have, what the Dutch were interested in was building and maintaining a reasonable air capability in their distant colony in the Dutch East Indies. Now known as Indonesia, the Dutch East Indies was a huge source of wealth for the Netherlands. Tea, coffee, tin, rubber, and, especially, oil meant the colony was too valuable to not maintain substantial military forces in order to defend it. The Royal Netherlands East Indies Army was an independent entity whose job was to protect and hold the vast archipelago for the Netherlands. And if the Dutch at home were not too worried about air power, their colonial brethren were keen adopters of military aircraft, although still in limited numbers. In the mid-1930s, the Dutch, now somewhat concerned by an increasingly aggressive Japan, decided they could do with an up-to-date fighter for the East Indies Army Air Force. A specification was issued that stipulated for a capable aircraft that was as simple and rugged as possible for service on rough colonial fields. In November 1934, Fokker put forward their proposal and a contract was signed for the construction of a prototype. This first flew on March 27, 1936. The design team, led by Erich Schatzky, a German Jewish immigrant who I will talk about more in a forthcoming video, had created a design that was something of a blend of the old and new. In many ways a transitional aircraft, the Fokker D.XXI had a mixed construction. Welded steel tubes formed the fuselage, which was skinned in aluminium from the nose to the cockpit, and then with fabric for the rear fuselage and tail. The wings were wooden, and the aircraft had a fixed undercarriage. Armament was intended to be 4 FN Browning rifle-caliber machine guns, though Fokker, who had a flair for adaptability in their aircraft, gave the option of fitting cannon in blisters under the wings. Similarly, the D.XXI was built to be capable of taking various radial engines to suit potential customers' needs. Though some of the features of the D.XXI were dated, especially in comparison to other designs that were about to enter service then, the Fokker team had built exactly the sort of aircraft the Dutch East Indies Air Force required. Tough, repairable and nimble. And that was almost for naught, because the Dutch government had a change of heart in 1936 and decided that bombers should be the priority. They also weren't convinced that the D.XXI was needed because a new fighter concept, the twin-engine heavy fighter as exemplified by the Fokker G1, was being developed, as was another more advanced Dutch fighter at the time. However, although the Dutch government experienced a quibble, other nations, recognising the D.XXI as exactly what they needed, moved in to make orders. Finland ordered 7 in 1937, plus a manufacturing licence. These aircraft were fitted with Bristol Mercury 8 9-cylinder radial engines that developed 830 horsepower. This was followed by a belated order for 36 from the home Dutch government, who finally got the idea that having at least a few modern fighters might be useful given the growing tensions in Europe at the time. Like the Finnish aircraft, these were fitted with the Mercury 8s and 4 machine guns, giving the aircraft a top speed of 286 miles per hour. The Danish government ordered 2, though some sources say 3, plus a license to build 10 more in Denmark. The Dane Fokkers were noted for being the lowest powered of the type, with Mercury 6s generating 645 horsepower, but having a heavy armament of 2 8mm machine guns and 2 20mm Madsen cannons under the wings. The final purchasers were Republican Spain, who bought a manufacturing license. Fokker would perform some work over the next couple of years on improved variants of the D.XXI, mainly looking at versions with folding undercarriages and more powerful engines, such as the Bristol Hercules, Rolls-Royce Merlin and the Daimler-Benz DB600H. But nothing came of these, and in total 148 Fokker D.XXIs were built. And they experienced very mixed fortunes. Republican Spain eventually built none of the type. A factory was constructed, but it was overrun by nationalist forces during the Spanish Civil War before any of the aircraft could be completed. The Danish aircraft were all in service by the time of the German invasion of April 1940, but they saw no action and 8 were captured. The Dutch aircraft, in contrast, fought valiantly and with a surprising measure of success. At the invasion of the Netherlands by Germany on May 10, 1940, 28 D.XXIs were serviceable of the 36 that had been ordered. These went into action almost immediately and, despite having performance inferior to the Bf-109s that they faced, managed several kills against the more formidable German fighters. They also managed to inflict severe casualties on German transport aircraft, reputedly shooting down 37 Junkers Ju-52s that were carrying paratroopers for the initial attacks. But numbers were very much against them. The Dutch D.XXIs fought on until the Netherlands surrendered on May 14. By that point, only 8 remained capable of fighting. It was in Finnish hands that the Fokker D.XXI really made its name as a tough, capable fighter. At the outbreak of the Winter War between the Soviet Union and Finland on November 30th, 1939, 41 D.XXIs were in service with the Finnish Air Force. These scored the type's first kill on December 1st when a Soviet SB bomber was shot down. The hardy design, rugged engineering and tough fixed undercarriage, which was capable of being fitted with skis for operating on snow-covered airfields, actually proved an advantage in the harsh conditions, and the D.XXI proved a good match against contemporary Soviet fighters of the day. A number of Finnish pilots achieved ace status during the conflict, with Jorma Savanto, apologies for the pronunciation which is no doubt wrong, getting 13 kills in the Fokker during the 3-month war. With fighting between the Finns and Russia resuming through 1941-44, the so-called Continuation War, the D.XXIs were still a critical fighter for the Finns, despite numbers of more modern aircraft becoming available to them. They would ultimately build 93 of the planes to add to their initial 7 between 1939 and 1944. A re-engining program was initiated due to a shortage of the Mercuries, and some rearming attempts were made, but the Fokkers carried on with a few minor modifications throughout the war and weren't actually retired from flying service until 1949. All in all, not a bad end for an aircraft that was in many ways outdated when it first flew, but which was actually well designed for its role as a frontier fighter operating in primitive conditions. Of the Fokker D.XXIs originally built, one remains at the Finnish Air Force Museum. Although there is another final footnote. A restoration company is rebuilding one of the Fokkers that was shot down during the battle for the Netherlands. So hopefully soon we will be able to see a Fokker D.XXI restored to its glory and once again in the skies where it belongs. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please drop a like, maybe subscribe, and look in the description for other ways you can help support the channel. Have a good one, keep safe, and I'll catch you all again as soon as possible.